Thank you all for coming. I've been in the games field since the late 1970s, back when dinosaurs roamed the internet. And I started as a game designer and did that, and then became a startup guy. And today am now have become useless overhead as an advisor or board member for various game and other consumer-facing technology. With F2P, I started working on F2P in 2005. I do a fair bit of work in East Asia, and that was the only place in the world to be able to do that. Anyway, it has become fairly well known, and there is a bit of science about how digital technologies, and particularly mobile, have changed the way we work, play, and live. In fact, that the internet and mobile have done things like change what our attention spans are, how we consume entertainment, and have changed our very thought patterns. With the introduction, digital has also disrupted games, and F2P has accelerated the changes that we've seen in the broad digital community into games. And I want to discuss this because all of you know that F2P has changed the way we do games, but I don't think this industry has thought far enough. What's interesting is the scientists and the deep thinkers on this, people like Sherry Turkle, who wrote the best-selling Alone Together, and some of the other books that I'll be mentioning at the end of this, have referred to games as the case study that they recommend that you see what's coming in terms of how the next generation of kids, of millennials, are changing. But the games industry has not thought about this. So this is going to be told as a horror story, but not a lots of gore and zombies attacking horror story, more like a ghost story about how F2P, with its array of tools to modify player behavior, is not only changing the games we do, but it's also changing how we as game designers and developers go from how we design the games, but also how we play and appreciate the games. So what we know, digital services, the mobile medium, and the internet change human behavior. That's fairly well established. There's a lot of science we can refer you to. F2P games are all about promoting habit formation. You don't get paid unless people play and unless people consume. Therefore, you want to get people in the habit of being able to do that. And then lastly, you'll note, if you go back to the list of the most popular games of 2007 worldwide, it is a very different list than the list of 2017. So let's talk about the way things used to work. Children discovered games via the classics. You played Risk or Parcheesi with your parents. You discovered Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario. You played things like checker and chess and tic-tac-toe. Gamers, and back when I was starting to do this in the late 1970s, once you graduated from being a kid into being an adult who played games, that was not something that respectable adults did. So you were finding games because you wanted to, or because you were a contrarian and very stubborn, but most of us were doing it because you wanted to do it. Game designers, those of us who were among the first cohort of modern game designers, generally gravitated to the games we liked. Back when this was a $100 million industry, it's now a $90 billion industry, people didn't say, I want to be able to do cow clicker games so I can get rich. You chose the games you wanted. And then lastly, game reception was measured, and this is an artifact of the computer game industry, by sales and secondarily by play. For 25 years, the shiny disc in a cardboard box had the revenue model disconnected from whether or not people played it. For that 20 to 25 year period, if the box was sold, and if it did not come back to the store within 48 hours, there was a 94 to 98% chance that you'd sold through. In other words, and this held for 25 years. So game designers did not have to worry about whether or not someone actually had played their game, because they simply didn't have the feedback. And by the time they did their next game, 2 to 3 years down the line, one hopes if they'd put out a turkey that people had forgotten it. Subscription, which was the $9.95 a month to $14.95 a month that that was pioneered by Ultima Online and then through World of Warcraft, was a more honest system because you had to get people engaged enough to be willing to pay a large amount of money per month. But it is still not quite F2P because you ended up paying for the box and then you had the privilege of paying a monthly thing. So let's flash forward to what F2P has done. F2P is now the dominant revenue model in games, and that together with digital, discussed earlier, is rapidly changing our relationship with games. And we are going to, in this talk, I'm going to describe how it's changing to the extent that we know. So children no longer, still encounter the classic games, but they are often captured first by the electronic babysitter, whether it be a tablet, whether it be their parents' phone, whether it be something that is designed to get their attention. That usually happens as early as 1. Games are no longer chosen by a lone, socially dysfunctional boy, which is what most of us early game designers are. They are often, what games you like are often decided by social proof, that is, what the community of people you fall into, because when almost all of your friends also have game devices, and a phone is a game device, then you often will end up choosing what you want to do, like which movies do we go together, which games do we choose. The other thing, of course, is behavioral targeting, which is the tool set that we as F2P designers, monetization experts, and so on, have been able to figure out people. We know that we are often in a race to make sure that we get one of the people in the front row. We know that you have a choice of games, and we want to take it away from you. We want to know if you're susceptible, that we get you in our game. Game designers, far from being disconnected from their revenue model or having it invisible to them, are being driven by the tyranny of the marketplace. There are many metrics, all of which you know, D+1, D1, D7, D30. You get extremely fast feedback, and you get it on several different levels. And as a result, we as game designers are becoming consumed by the games we design, because if there's having problems getting started, we make changes to the game. And if it's succeeding, we try and figure out how to build upon the success. So the demands of user acquisition, engagement, and monetization permeate game design. So F2P changes almost everything. Engagement is a requirement, is a condition of business. If you do not get people to engage, you don't get them to pay. It's not the old model that we had before. Games are now a service. They used to be, as again, back when years began with 1, games were sold as products. Players are sales targets first, then customers. This is what F2P does to us. By the way, just to step back for a moment, you'll hear this again. You will know almost all the high concepts I am saying. The issue that I'm suggesting is you look under the hood, and the purpose of this talk is to equip you to be able to see what it's doing in the long term. You've already changed a lot in the last 10 years. This is trying to get a roadmap to the next 10 years. And by the way, just to give you, I will discuss prescriptions at the end, I don't pretend to have all or even most of the answers. This is an early process that we're starting to understand, and I'll get to resources that are good for doing that. Next, designers and live operations are in the direct marketing business. I've given talks and we brought some of the best thinkers on direct marketing, but F2P is about direct marketing. The same processes and techniques that help you sell, that used to sell magazine subscriptions, that get people to buy stuff from Amazon, to give back to Mike, since he gave me a good introduction, are now used in the games. We are in the mail shot business. And if you want to read proof of that, I would suggest Drayton Bird's Common Sense Direct to Digital Marketing, which is the Bible of direct marketing. If you read it, you will, 1, see that F2P games are all about direct marketing, and 2 is, if you have any pretensions to art, you will be really depressed. The games are changing. The mechanics that we play with, the mechanics that we played in the games that we grew up with, are no longer the ones that have been changed either beyond recognition or substituted for F2P. If you look at popular games from about 20 some odd years ago, let's put Myst to the side, but even things like Civilization, or things like even except for the classics like Tetris, the mechanics that are used that work then do not generally work now. There are a couple of exceptions. For example, the sports games have not changed yet. But if you think back to what the game, just choose any bestseller list or choose the games you were playing 10 to 20 years ago, and you will see just how radically and how at a subtle level the game mechanics have been changed. Everything is about, the priority is about hooking the players. For those of you who aren't familiar with the terms, in psychology and in behavioral targeting, hooking means getting people to play. Or getting people to use something. It does not mean that they're doing it because they want to or they enjoy it. Hooking does not care why you do it. And one of the things that I want to point as a clear warning bell, and why I said this is a horror story, is F2P as a system doesn't care whether the player enjoys the game. It only cares that they come back. And that is changing the way they do it. Because in the purest form, F2P games reduce to the engagement loop. That is, how do you get somebody to come back? How do you get them to do it over and over again? So let's step back to why we play games and why I would hope most of you got into this business. The first reason, of course, the one that we all will say if asked just on the street, is enjoyment. We play games for fun. We play games for challenge. We play games to be social. We also play games now, increasingly, to pass or kill the time. And then lastly, we do it as a matter of habit or addiction. Again, I will refer you to the literature later, but digital technologies are extremely habit-forming. All you have to do is look at the way that people look at their email or their text messages or their social media, which, and how it's hard to have a conversation. There is a great New Yorker cartoon which has 4 millennials gathered together, and one of them is saying brightly, as they all have their phones in front of them, "Isn't it great we got together so we could check our social media?" That is indicative of what we've done. What's important to understand is that the first two promote habit formation. You enjoy something. If you do something and you enjoy it, that tends to reinforce it. If you pass or kill the time and it's effective and you do it again, that's why you do it again. But it also leads to behavioral addiction, which I'll discuss a little bit later in this presentation. Obviously, for the people who are in the games business, you also play games in the process of making them, and for research, but how F2P affects that is going to be the thought exercise that I'm going to challenge. So, what has digital done to us? Which games mostly are? Shorter attention spans. By the way, for those of you who I see have been taking notes since my first slide, thank you for fighting your digital technology and paying attention through the first 6 slides. We're increasingly multitaskers. Many of you are looking at other screens while this and other talks are going on. This is, again, something that digital technology and having it always with you will make a difference. Our consumption patterns across entertainment media have changed. I can go through music and movies and books and so on, but since all of you consume them and have seen how those industries have gone through, they have been as massively disrupted as games are, though I would argue that none of those fields have had the substance of what they do changed anywhere near as much by digital technology as games have been. And that's because we're an interactive medium where they are not. Digital makes possible, obviously, new modalities of consumption. I use binge watching. Probably the most significant thing that has occurred that affects games is that virtual objects have achieved parity with and exceed physical objects in perceived value. If you go back as recently as 15 years, Digital music was not valuable. CDs were much more valuable. Digital movies were not particularly valuable, but DVDs were. Actually, the interesting thing that puts the light on that are books, which books went digital, and actually the last 2 years, the percentage of books being bought have increased just marginally to physical books, and no one's quite clear on why that's happened. As a lifelong book reader who doesn't feel comfortable unless I'm surrounded by books, I think this is great, but it's not clear why that's happening. The reason why this is important is F2P is all about making sure that virtual objects become worth more than physical objects, because that is part of the system that you're doing, which means that F2P is about leading people into a virtual world over the physical world in which we inhabit. And there are some merits to that, but it is a contest between the two areas. And the other thing that is critical over here, which is the thing under the hood, the monster under the hood, is that digital media is extraordinarily efficient in behavioral modification and addiction. So let's go. There's been some recent science on behavioral addiction. By the way, just to make any one of you who is an academic here happy, the behavioral addiction results are considered to be preliminarily conclusive. If you don't have 20 or 30-year data and it's not peer-reviewed, that's not great. But there are enough wide and comparison studies that show that behavioral addiction is as powerful as physical addiction. That means that behavior modification is as powerful as what the tools you're using are as powerful as heroin. And by the way, if that sounds like an improbable statement, let me point you to the Manchurian Candidate or the concept of brainwashing. It is possible by doing behavioral targeting and behavioral modification to change the way that people think, act, and believe. And with games, we have the power to do that, whether or not we choose to do that. It is intrinsic to the most popular consumer technology. Your phone has changed the way you interact with the world. I don't think I need to elaborate on this because most people have seen this. It is a pathway to achieving F2P commercial goals. If you get people addicted, they're going to show up more often. And as I said, it's poorly understood. Okay, how games change us. It's no longer whether you win or lose, but that you keep playing the game. This can be a good thing. I played Dungeons & Dragons growing up. I thought it was great that I played every week. But now the F2P system means that every game is about continuation. So having winners or losers, like the games we grew up on, it's okay, but it's secondary. The capture us in engagement loops that I've discussed, they combine with social media to basically your friends and acquaintances and people with similar tastes are used against you to be able to cause you to be put into a game environment, and they provide a compelling escape. God bless it. That's why I got into this business. I hope it continues to do it. But that is not the primary purpose of F2P, except as it facilitates engagement. Here's what happens to you as a game designer. You've all heard the expression, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The F2P revenue model is your hammer. It makes games transactional at both the in-game level, where you're trying to get people to spend, but also on a meta level, where it's trying to buy. F2P is about bargaining for your time. If I get you to play Candy Crush Saga every day of the week, I have a much better chance of monetizing than if not. It's transactional. We're steered, obviously, towards game systems that optimize making money, and we've learned to play for the long run. We've learned the phrase lifetime value rather than trying to get the most money out of people as fast as possible. But the other thing that F2P revenue models do is it turns you into thinking about players are game tokens. They are resources to be emptied of the dollars in their pocket. And if you look at, for instance, early Zynga is a great example, where it was just about how can we rape the player for the most amount of money. That is very much what F2P does. It's not just the Zynga corporate culture was a reflection of what that is. F2P is a new and powerful technology that can be used for good or evil, like nuclear power, like any new technology. I want to don't choose wisely, but not all of us control the games we do. We work for our bosses. So at minimum, understand the effects of F2P and understand what it's doing to your games, what it's doing to your players, and what it's doing to you. Now, having warned you about the evils of F2P, let's talk about how you can do something to reduce the effects. First off, just be aware of the power of games. By listening to this talk, I hope that you will remember it, and then you will be aware, you will think about this. Again, you know most of the top points I've had. The issue is I'm asking you to think a little bit deeper about what it means. Educate yourself about feedback loops, which are the central thing by which we addict people, which F2P works its magic for good or for evil. I would suggest, and this is a lesson I learned the hard way, ring-fence favorite games. I love Stratomatic Baseball, which is a tabletop baseball and now a computer baseball game. And the way I made sure I didn't ruin that, I've been playing in a league for 40 years, is I resolved never to design a baseball game. So I did not lose a game that I played for love, for which I've had an honest relationship. Oh, yes, we've had our difficulties. We've gone to the relationship counselor, but I'm still playing Stratomatic Baseball. If you are a computer game designer, play indie, board, or role-playing games. In other words, paper games, because these are games that exist in a different world than your F2P, and see what games are being done for either different motives or mainly for fun. And then seek games for game's sake. In other words, continue to have a lifelong learn of game design and praxis. Then lastly, as I promised, let me give you some resources. So the book that you will come across that is the best known one is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It is very much a positive view of what habit. It says here's how powerful habit is, and then it talks about how it can be turned to make you better in life and better in business. It is a very useful foundational book. It is not the book that I would say if you only read one, it would be the one you read. And that is Irresistible, which is by Adam Alter, which is, the title tells you what, The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked. Not only does Alter examine a science of the process of being put together, but he is also someone who actually points out that you could learn to understand how people get hooked by digital technology. He says you can understand a lot by seeing games, and he interviews many great game designers. People like Frank Lantz. He refers to World of Warcraft. Good and bad. It is an absolutely terrific book. The irony is that he ends up by saying the single greatest force for good in dealing with digital addiction is gamification, which, as you can tell, I don't agree with. But it is a well put together study, putting together what we know about behavioral modification, and it's worthwhile reading. Some older books. Why Smart People Make Big Money Mistakes and How to Correct Them. I described this book. It's about behavioral economics, which is where this all started. If you read that book, in each chapter you will laugh because you know somebody else who's doing the stupid financial behavior they're describing, or you will cringe because you're the one doing it. The reason I recommend this is finance is very much like games, that it works with numbers, clear goals, and everything else. Grown-up Digital is one that I recommend as a curio. It's an absolutely fabulous thing done by a market researcher who doesn't try and impose his values. It's a terrific report on how digital technology was changing the generation of kids. The problem is it's from 2008, 2009, and the mobile world mobile was just coming in at that point. It is the best book of its kind, but it is a place and time which was now 8 or 9 years ago. And I have to give a hat tip to the pioneers. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for his work in behavioral economics. He did it with Amos Tversky, who didn't win the Nobel Prize because you're required to be alive to receive it, and Tversky failed his saving role or something like that before the Nobel Prize was handed out. Thinking Fast and Slow is a very good book. It is less applicable. And then Richard Thaler, it was their main U.S. disciple for spreading the science of behavioral economics. And Nudge is about using government how to use government to nudge better behaviors, very much like treating the entire polity as if it's a game system. Anyway, I hope that I do not, in identifying the problem and describing something to think, this is something that is going to affect the rest of our lives. Free to play for almost anybody here will be a function of your professional life for the next 10, 20, 30, probably 30 years. I bring this up. I hope that it will inspire you to think of it, and I hope that it will inspire some of you to come up with some of the answers that I have not thought through far enough to see. Thank you for coming.